Voices to hear.
Hello everyone and welcome to Voices to Hear. My name is Arthur and my guest today is Dimitar Nedelkowski. Dimitar, correct me if I'm wrong, but you studied Polish. You are also a translator and a teacher on your free time, that's right?
Yeah, so I study Polish at Macedonian University of Cyril and Methodius. I study literature and translation studies, but besides the Polish language, I also studied German, which I have C1, and I speak English from a very young age, as well as I have taken interests into Arabic, Chinese, and I tried Hebrew for some time. I also wanted to ask you, what languages do you speak and how well do you speak them?
Well, so I'm a native French speaker. I learned also Italian at a young age. I don't have the level of a native speaker, but I can speak Italian quite fluently. Same for English. I don't have the level of a native speaker, I would say, but English is not a problem for me. I also took interest in Arabic, a bit Hebrew as well, but the alphabet it blocked me when I tried. I tried to learn Macedonian with some good points. Some parts are good, some parts are less good, but I try my best. So when did you realize you like languages? And also, did you like your language teachers at school?
Well, as a kid that's born in the Balkans, I guess we're kind of surrounded with languages all the time. You grew up in a Macedonian household. Your parents were born in Yugoslavia, so we had a lot of Serbian at home as well when it comes to music, films, and series on the television. From time to time, we also had Bulgarian when it comes to music and friends. So a Macedonian kid is really born trilingual, we can say, from the start. When I went to the kindergarten, I also had kids which spoke Turkish, Albanian, and the Roma language, and for me it was very exotic and exciting, the fact that I could not understand what they were saying to me. So you can kind of see that since from an early age, I always was surrounded by languages and I had no choice but to start taking interest in them. As for my teachers in school, Macedonian teachers can be very boring and very rigid in their way of teaching. However, I really found my English and German teachers to be very nice and understanding, which in some way bolstered my expectations about languages and gave me the idea that maybe this is something that I should do for maybe the rest of my life.
Wonderful to hear, and happy you found good teachers around you.
But since you also come from a similar background for me, I mean, you also take interest into languages, when did you realize that languages are a thing for you? And how were your teachers in your French schools? Were they different from ours?
They were for sure different because they were French, so they had a French background. I mean, that's stupid to say, I know, but we have different point of view. For example, our classes. We were around 36 sometimes, so obviously it's way harder to learn in a class where you are 36, even more when it comes to languages, because obviously you have to practice. So it wasn't that well, honestly, but I found a way to like it. I don't know how, but I found a way to like it. And I started learning languages on my own because school wasn't happening enough. And because I was in high school this time, not in the middle school, but in my high school, a lot of people spoke Arabic. So I was like, oh, I have to understand them, because what are they gossiping about? Like, I need to know. So I learned a bit, and it wasn't very effective, but I tried at least.
You've mentioned that you've started learning a language at a certain young age, given your surroundings. When is the best time to start learning languages? And do you think that kids are learning faster and should first be fluent in our own native language before exploring other languages?
The best time to start learning is as soon as you can. Well, clearly, children are like sponges, like they absorb knowledge at a rate that I can't even imagine as an adult now. Kids should learn their native languages first because they have to talk with their family, and family is very, very important for the development of children. And you, what is your opinion?
I kind of agree that children do act like sponges. Whatever you pour over them, they do absorb, especially when it comes to languages. Speaking from my personal experience, when I was in the kindergarten, we used to learn both the Cyrillic and the Latin alphabet, as well as English and Macedonian words at the same time. So, on one hand, I had a language that is completely unrelated to Macedonian, yet very, very relevant in media, in books, in social life. So it would happen to me many times that I go back home and I say a word in English instead of Macedonian. Only until a certain age, I started differentiating both languages. I saw Macedonian as something that's a part of me, something that needs to be nourished. But I also saw English as another part of me, which I also focused on developing. And by the time I went to primary school, I could already speak both on the same level. So kids are indeed magnets when it comes not to just languages but knowledges in general. However, if a kid is born monolingual, I don't think that when it gets older it should not study languages. I feel like when a person is fully formed, it has a better perspective on languages. The acquisition process is not the same, of course, as a kid, as we are no longer empty sponges ready to be watered. But I think there is a beauty in the fact that a person that is 18 years plus takes an interest into languages, because then he develops his own approach to learning said language and develops his own structure on how to approach problems in the said language.
Oh, okay, super interesting. And talking about that, do you play a certain role when you teach?
I like to see the teaching process as telling a story, since I believe rules in the language are very important to understanding said language. However, I also believe that the best way to teach a language is to treat it as a story, a very complex one, given the fact that there are many parts of a language, such as grammar, vocabulary, phonetics, etymology. And when you bind these different aspects of a language together and link them as if you're telling a story with multiple characters inside, it really helps a person understand how the language operates. It helps understand the story of the language. It helps the person make better sense of the rules, of certain nuances and certain exemptions that appear in every language, not just Macedonian. I wanted to ask you, since you also have experiences in teaching French, how do you see this part of the process and what role do you play to help your students learn better?
Well, the role I play is the role of the teacher, but clearly I have to be more outgoing. I have to keep the student interested, and I have to be heard very clearly, even more when it comes to pronunciation, articulation, putting the accent at the right place, because we don't have much tones in French, but still we have to pronounce sentences in a certain way for it to sound natural. So I have also to talk a bit slower than I usually talk in French. Besides that, I don't play too much of a role. I just make myself more understandable and more accessible for students who struggle with French.
And one more question. What is the usual age of your students? Do you work with older people or do you work with younger people?
My youngest student was 5 or 6. I mean, he's still my student, but my oldest was probably around 75. So I have a huge range, and obviously it changes a lot on how you teach. Plus the person who was 75, I mean, who still is 75 or 76 now, spoke a very good French, but had a strong accent and wanted to work on it. So also because of what he wanted, what were his goals, I had to adapt it. Like, I can't teach the same way to a kid and to an adult. I have a question for you now. What did learning languages allow you to do? And do you feel like the same person when you speak a different language? Do you think more multilingual people have an advantage understanding different perspective? Or the Dimitar in Macedonian is the same as in Polish, as the same in English and German, etc.?
I will give you a small anecdote about this. So when I was in Poland and I still thought that Polish and Macedonian are the same language, I used to tell to the taxi driver to drive prawo.
Oh,
Prawo in Macedonian means forward, but prawo in Polish means right. So naturally, the driver just turned right and kept driving for 1 kilometer. This confused me so much that I took even yes and no as something that needs to be checked afterwards. So I would say that depending on your fluency, your personality does in fact change in different languages. When I speak English, I feel the need to add a lot of details. I tend to ask more. In Macedonian, sometimes I really feel like I am talking a bit too much, sometimes even a lot more than I would want to talk. But this doesn't come as something that I think, it just comes naturally with the language. While when I speak Polish, I feel like I can touch a lot on my emotions, especially when it comes to expressing negative emotions in Polish, while I don't usually do this in English and Macedonian. About the part with understanding different perspective, this is absolutely true, especially given the fact that even literature can be different from language to language. Certain phraseologies don't exist in English and cannot be applied in Polish or vice versa. It helps dive better into the local culture of the said people when you speak their language. So learning the local language does help integrate in another culture, and it helps you kind of infiltrate the local life of the people, especially when you hear some angry people talking behind you. And
Yes.
sometimes we can guess that it's about us, but when we know the language, we will know that something is being spoken about us. Do you sometimes feel a sense of belonging when you speak the language, let's say Italian in your case?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I love speaking Italian. Like, it truly makes me so happy to speak in Italian. The biggest of tragedy in my life is to not have Italian colleagues, honestly. Like, I love speaking Italian. I feel like home as soon as I start speaking that language. And what about you?
Honestly, I'll tell you a funny story. In 2023, when I was in Krakow, in Poland, I was with my friends and we had one whole day to spend there. So we decided to go to a karaoke pub, some of my favorite pastime activities, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah.
We started singing in Polish. And at some point, it was so hot inside, it was the middle of the summer. We decided to go out and grab some fresh air. And while we were outside, some Polish people started talking to us in Polish, and we, of course, started responding. And then came the question, where are you from? Are you from Krakow? And I had to say, no, I'm from Skopje, Macedonia. Oddly enough, they asked me for my ID because they did not believe that I came from there. And for a moment, for a slight moment, I really felt like a local person because I could not be distinguished. There was almost nothing giving me away. I really felt like one of them.
We have the connected stories, and yeah, languages clearly makes bridges between people, and that's a very, very good thing. So when you learn a language, is fluency really the goal, or is there something else that is more important in your opinion?
Of course, when we learn a language, most of us strive for fluency. But the beautiful thing is, when you learn a language, you kind of decide on yourself when you are fluent. Like, yeah, you can do the official exams in the language, the state exams, but at a certain point, you run out of directions. There are words that you will probably never use, but you've probably learned. And if we don't know those words, does that really mean that we're not fluent? I mean, do we really find ourselves in such a situation that we will not be able to express those words and people will not call us fluent? No, I don't think so. For me, what matters the most is that I can hold a conversation with a person and the person can understand me, reply back, and I get the message crossed and I get the message accepted in return. I can understand what I'm saying, he can understand what I'm saying, and I can understand him when he replies to me. I can probably write a letter or a complaint, and along the way, as you learn, I guess you start to appreciate the culture way more than when you don't learn. So integration for me is also a very big aspect. I want to be the Macedonian abroad that can speak the language and also feel the stuff the local residents students feel, the anger, the happiness, the joy, the sorrow, so that I can really, really feel like, yeah, I am not from here, but I know this place as if it was my own. And what about you, Arthur? Do you agree with the statement, and do you aim for fluency when you learn a language?
Well, I truly agree with you. Fluency is not the end goal in my case. I want to be understood, same. And I want also to understand people. Well, I would prefer understanding without being understood than the opposite. Because, yeah, it's frustrating for me to not understand people. I mean, that's a problem I have in general, but with languages, it makes it even harder. So, no, for me, there is always something more than just the fluency. When I started learning Macedonian, it was to be able to understand people. When I started learning English, it was to understand videos and video games and be able to learn more about the world around me. But I didn't care much about the fact of being fluent. I wanted to be understood and to understand. The fluidity, the fluency came later, and I already achieved what I wanted, but it's nice to be fluent.
It seems that we share a common perspective.
Yes.
Fluency, I think, is at the end of the day something that we define, and it doesn't have a correct border. But I want to touch on something else. Has learning or teaching languages changed how you listen to people? And in that way, are online classes as productive as physical ones?
That's very hard. I would say that a lot of people, they don't have time or the energy, to go out and learn a language. And plus the online classes I do are like one-on-one, and it would be quite expensive, I would say, if that was in physical form, because I would have to, to move, to travel to either the place of the person, or the opposite, the person has to travel to mine. So teaching online allows a lot of accessibility, and you learn in place where you are more comfortable because you learn from your place and no one enters your place. So for a lot of people, a lot of my students, I know, or I suppose, have some social issues, especially the young ones. I had a student that was absolutely brilliant, but really, really struggled to express himself and even look at the camera because he was too shy. So yeah, learning online has a lot of advantages. At the same time, the physical classes, the ones where we are in front of each other, I feel like it allows more things, because obviously you can play with the space. You can move more to express your ideas, and you can make people interact with each other, because obviously interacting with people helps so much to learn language. And the student doesn't feel always very comfortable interacting just with the teacher. Maybe you can talk about that point, by the way, as the only student in your course.
Classes.
Yeah. So what is your opinion on that?
Well, Arthur, as being my student, so to say, for Macedonian, because we hold our classes physically, I think I'm gonna touch more on that aspect. I really like it when I teach and I can see the student in front of me. And I'm not one of those teachers that is gonna punish someone or is gonna, I don't know, scold him for dozing off for a couple of minutes, because I don't think it's possible. Even if it's your favorite thing in the world, you cannot always stay focused. And it's okay to look aside, check the time, check the messages every now and then. That gives me some reassurance that you're breathing, number one, and number two, that you're alive, that you as a person do in fact exist. So physical for me is very important, because right now I would honestly kill for an Arabic teacher to come to me and say, okay, I will teach you, we need to meet every Monday, Thursday, Friday, let's say so, and we're gonna have physical classes in Arabic. It's something that I like, because learning online does have its pluses, I would say. Like, for example, you're sitting at home, maybe you're eating something on the side, maybe you're drinking something on the side. It does give you more freedom when you learn a language. But also, when you're at home, I feel like it's easier to be distracted with your surroundings. I have a cat at home, for example, and whenever she sees me that I'm sitting on a laptop, she must jump on it. It's her instinct, I would say. And this distracts me so easy. I can have a very good online class. When I was learning Polish during the pandemic, I had amazing classes. But even then, I felt like I really need to see the teacher in front of me, eyes to eyes. Because then I feel more motivated, I feel more stimulated, and I feel like I can feel more as a human being. And because it's also important for the teacher to be present in front of me, to be able to 100% fully learn. Yeah, I can doze off sometimes, but the fact that someone is present here and I don't want to waste his time remotivates me to just jump back inside and get back on course. course.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, can you really understand a culture without speaking its language? What's your thought on that?
I would say you can understand a part of the culture. You can have like a surface understanding of the culture. And I have a good example on that because I thought about it. It's people who are very interested in Japanese culture. We have a lot of them in France, but are they really interested in the Japanese culture? Honestly, because they are non-critical. They don't like understand what's going on in the real Japan, not just the one of animes and manga and all. And so I think that learning, you can understand a part of the culture without learning the language, but not knowing the language actually stops you from understanding everything that's going on in country or inside the culture for cultures that have their own languages but no country of their own. I have a bit that with China because I'm at a very Chinese moment of my life, I would say. I'm very interested in what's going on in China, but at the same time I don't speak any of the languages of China, so I know I don't understand the biggest part. I don't have the spirit, the feeling of understanding. It's very superficial. I know it, but I can understand some parts, I would say. So yeah. And what's your opinion about that? Are you also in a very Chinese moment of your life?
I used to be in a very Chinese moment of my life until I decided I don't have the patience for it. As I suppose most people learning Chinese do feel like that. But especially when it comes to learning a culture, I think the culture doesn't just stop in the media and in the big cities where everyone speaks English. At some point, if you really want to see a culture, you need to go to those remote parts. And I feel like everyone has at some point felt the urge to do this if they really, really love traveling past the Instagram stories and photo shoots. Especially when I was in Ukraine, I went to this town which is on the border. And of course, I spoke some Ukrainian back then. Now I've forgotten most of it. However, I still understand it. And there are some stuff which do translate in English as, for example, let's say sawo. They translate as bacon, for example, but it's not really, really bacon that you get. If you hate fat, in fact, you would hate sawo because it's mostly the fat part of the bacon that stands out. There is practically almost no meat inside of that. So yeah, I would say if I spoke English and asked for bacon, I would be very upset about what I would get instead,
Yeah, yes, clearly.
And especially when it comes to food, I suppose learning a language can help you order better stuff, no? Because then you would have talked to the local people, they will tell you the names, they will tell you the delicates. Like when you go to Macedonia and you go to a traditional kafan and you say, I want a pizza, you will not get a pizza, you will get a pastarmalia instead, which you should know that pastarmalia is not the same as pizza. It's completely different shaped, but for English people, yeah, this passes as a pizza. But after you have seen a pastramaile in your life, you know how it looks, the contents. It's like this thing with meats inside. Yeah, it clings, right?
Yes. But that's not pizza at all. Huh?
But food is also part of the culture, no?
Yeah, yes.
And this is not just with food, this is with practically everything in life, whether it's politics, pop culture, food, traditions, sometimes even religious festivities. People call them differently in different countries. So yeah, I think you can understand the culture without speaking its language, but it's essential to know a language to know the culture, to really get to the bottom of this culture.
Yeah.
And now, when we spoke about the Chinese moment in our lives, I want to ask you, which language will be the dominant one in the future? What do you think?
I feel like the English and even more American hegemony is starting to, disappear. So I would say that we won't have that much of a dominating language, but more in a regional dominating languages. For example, South America starts to also be very interested with Chinese because they deal a lot with Chinese or at least Chinese speaking countries, communities. So I think we won't have a very dominant language, but more in depending on the topics, depending on the context. Well, for example, French is the language when you want to talk about wine. Like, do you want to talk about wine in English? No, you don't. No, you will talk about it in French. Do I want to talk about pasta in German? No, they don't have the right words. No, please, let's talk about pasta in Italian. Don't be ridiculous, etc. Like, depending on the topics, obviously, the right language, the best language, the proper language, that's the word I wanted, the proper language to use will change. So, yeah, that's my opinion. We will more have not decentralization. English will lose a bit of its hegemony, I would say. And you?
Well, I do fully agree with you, I must say. Like, if you go to Eastern Europe, you learn Russian to succeed there. If you travel to Europe, you learn... Honestly, you can learn anything in Europe.
English is enough, I would say.
Yeah, depending on what you focus in when you travel. But let's look at South America. Spanish. No doubt about it. You go to Argentina, you need to speak Spanish. You go to Africa, you mostly speak English or French. If you don't feel like learning Swahili or other languages that are present in Africa, you go to India. Well, Indians do actually know English, so you could go with English. But if you go to Asia, and I mean East Asia, Chinese is probably the most prevalent one. So I guess there is not gonna be one dominant language, but I think there's gonna be a dominant language in a certain region.
Yes.
Like previously mentioned, Russian in Eastern Europe. I don't think anything is gonna replace it sooner or later, honestly. Or for example, French and English in Africa. I think everyone there speaks at least one, and some people do actually speak both of them. And in the Balkans, for example, it's enough to know Serbian to be able to travel from Zagreb all the way to Skopje without needing to speak anything else. So I feel like English is still gonna be considered as the world language, but as time goes on, I feel like locally in certain regions, it slowly starts to lose its influence, and therefore it pushes people to learn Spanish, it pushes people to learn Chinese, it pushes people to learn Russian. That's why we have seen a surge of language apps.
Comes to the end for podcast of today. So thank you, Dime, for sharing all of your views and all the knowledge you had. And thank you, everyone, for listening to the podcast, and see you next time.
Bye.
Voices to hear.